Hey guys, Ron here with Innovative Digital Group. In today's video, I'm going to go over the components and the systems in order to get a warehouse management system done for your warehouse or your facility. So I get a lot of calls when people are looking for a barcode wireless system or a barcode scanning system. So I'm just going to go over the basics of what you need in terms of getting your warehouse set up for a warehouse management system. So I'm going to go over the hardware, the components, the software, typical use case scenarios, and what I've seen in the industry. So it's a little bit about my background. I've been doing this for about 18 years, started in 99. Even before 2.4 and 5 gig was out, I was doing a lot of wireless site surveys in 99. Like I mentioned, it was before 802.11. So this is before 2.4 existed in 5 gig. So we were working off of the NorEnd 900 megahertz system. And that's a little bit of background about me. You know, I've flown probably all over the world doing site surveys and implementations. Probably did over 1,000 site surveys. Pretty much I live and breathe in warehouses. So that's everything from design implementation, pre-sale support, and post-sale support. So the first thing that we're gonna need is probably this. You know, you've seen this kind of device in large shopping centers like Walmart, the Bay, Canadian Tire. Pretty much a lot of facilities have these barcode scanners. And it's an 802.11 device which connects to your typical wireless LAN system. So these are very different. If you're an IT administrator and you're used to managing a lot of wireless devices, these can be challenging because these are a lot different. They don't carry the same amount of milliwatt power in terms of the radio, and they're also known for being fast roaming devices. So a lot of companies hire me or hire our team to do these types of implementations because we have a lot of experience with fast roaming devices, wireless scanning, VT100 applications. Those are kind of your protocol that connects from here over the wireless to your server, whether you're running a Unix server, you know, a cloud hosted Azure server, or an AWS hosted kind of environment. So that's what a lot of companies hire our team for. And like I mentioned, it's very different between stationary laptops and this in the warehouse, because a lot of times these devices are on a forklift and they're going about 5 kilometers an hour, 10 kilometers an hour. They're zipping through aisles and a lot of metal and a lot of product. Whereas laptops, they have a lot more radio power, they're stationary, so your access point doesn't have to adjust a lot. So anyways, this model here is the MC9300. It's made by Zebra. Zebra started as Symbol as a company, then Motorola bought them out, then Zebra bought them out, so now they are called Zebra. These are Zebra wireless devices. This is the brick style MC9300, and they're very popular, probably one of the most popular devices out there in the market. So let's get started into the components of a wireless system. So obviously the first component that we're all aware of is your backbone. So wireless is just an extension to your wired network. So typically you're going to have, you know, your MDF. Let's say this is your main distribution area. This is called an MDF. So this is, let's say, your main core switch you're going to have. And typically in a design here, in a warehouse management system or a design, I'm going to have multiple redundant switches coming into the warehouse. And then from here, what you're going to have is Cat6 or copper runs that spread out to different access points in the building. So there's an access point here, an access point here. So maybe I'll have access points like this. And for redundancy, I would carry one AP over here. Now you're probably looking at this and saying, well, why did you do that? Why don't you just have one switch here? So the reason why I don't have one switch here, because let's say, you know, I've seen this in a lot of warehouses, like you know, I'm not going to name any large warehouses that I've been working with, but they typically would have one switch here, and they had a large shipment or put away from Home Depot. A Home Depot truck came in, and they'll usually dock you if your driver or your pallets aren't ready to go. So what ended up happening is one of the main switches went down in the warehouse, and they were down for 2 days. All of the deliveries, you know, whether it was Home Depot or Walmart, that the drivers that were scheduled for that day couldn't pick up, so they had docking fees. I think it was like over 7,000 per 3 hours, what they estimated. So anyways, that was just redundancy. There was a switch that went down, and also some cabling there. I think there's a fiber optic, an SPF that went down in the switch. So they were troubleshooting for days. And this is the reason why I have multiple switches in the warehouse, just to have redundancy. So if this switch goes down, at least this switch over here might have a link to another access point in this area. And then what could happen is this access point, let's say it was only operating at 50% milliwatt or 50% power. If we detect that this switch goes down and these APs are down, I can boost from 50% just for a temporary time being to 100%. And hopefully I get more coverage within those areas. But this is all based on your site survey. So the very first step to doing anything prior to putting in access points, getting a quote, getting a switch, the very first thing you need to do is have a site assessment or a wireless site survey. And in your wireless site survey, the number one thing that you need is a spectrum analysis. Now, quote me on this, if you're not using our company, using another company, the main thing you need, the first thing you need is a spectrum analyzer, a spectrum analysis. Because what a spectrum analysis is going to do, it's going to make sure that you have 2.4 or 5 gig clean air. If your air isn't clean in the warehouse, there's no point in putting 2.4 or 5. You may as well just go cellular to your scanners. It's going to cost a lot, but it's use case scenario. Like if you need to use cellular, then so be it. And if you can't use 2.4 because 2.4 is too crowded, or you can't use 5, then you can't. So that's the very first thing. Get a spectrum analysis. We use a spectrum analysis by a company called MetaGeek. We're a reseller for them, and they're pretty much like the gold standard. If you use Ekahau's, I think Ekahau's software just white labels MetaGeek's brand, and MetaGeek was like one of the pioneers of that spectrum analysis or spectrum analyzer. So that is the first thing. Get a spectrum analysis. Get a wireless site survey. Your wireless site survey is your Bible, your certification to say that a professional person or technician or engineer gave its stamp of approval, its blessing, right? To show that we have proper heat maps, we have proper signal to noise ratio, proper RSSI. So heat maps meaning it'll show colors of SNR, and it'll show whoever is looking at that there's no dead spots, because they've gone through, they've done every walk, and we can see every point. Because I've been in a lot of conference calls and meetings between two vendors fighting. The vendor, number one vendor is, let's say it's Motorola or Aruba or Cisco, saying, well, it's not our stuff, it's not our stuff. Then I have a conference call, we're all on the conference call with the client vendor, like Symbol Motorola or Zion Technologics. They're in a kind of like a pissing match or a battle between saying, hey, well, it's not my stuff, it's not my stuff. And when it all comes down to it, they're going to ask for that report, that certification. And there's been too many times where I've been in that situation, and they'll say, well, we don't have a site survey. We've never got a site survey done. And the first thing both parties are going to say is get a site survey done. Get someone in, get a heat map, because they want to make sure that the air is clean. Because if the air isn't clean, they don't know. They're just speculating. You know, it might be interference, it might be this. So basically you're wasting, you know, man hours, labor hours of level 2, level 3 engineers, software engineers getting escalated to management. So there's a lot of time involved. So that's why I really emphasize on site survey, certification, spectrum analysis, a whole bunch of stuff. So anyways, probably rambled on a little bit too long about that. So access points, you're gonna need access points, copper cabling, switches. Now the design part is a little tricky. There's VLAN segmentation, running 2.4, running 5, your firewall rules. I'm not going to get too much into that. I'm just going to go over the basics of what you need. So you've got your access points, your fiber optics. Don't daisy chain them. Try and just do like a distribution switch scenario. where if you have a lot of FSPs from your switches, just go direct from your switches. So switch there, and let's say a switch is here, just go direct. Don't daisy chain them and go like that. Just make sure they're going direct. And so you got your access points. Access points, we're a big Meraki seller just because it's ease of use, ease of management, and it's just, if you have a large IT department, or even if you don't, what you can see and what you can filter and what you can do in terms of Cisco Meraki is, it's amazing. Like, you have just so much reporting, you have alerts, you have notifications, you can test the cabling, the copper, you can get alerts of what's down, whether it's your gateway, whether it's the access point, whether it's your DNS server, and so on. And then also the support is like second to none. I've done a lot of cutovers at 2 in the morning on a Sunday, and I always get a response from Cisco Meraki, whether it's coming from the Philippines, or they're in Mexico, or they're in Israel, or in Lebanon. There's always someone there, and they're not just a junior level tech support person. They can, most of them can do like packet sniffing, packet captures. I'm very impressed with them. So the other thing, so we've got access point, we've got switches, we got copper. The last thing I would say in here is you're gonna need, not the last thing, but you're gonna need a label printer or barcode printer. So typically what I've seen in Barcode or in warehouse management systems are the Zebra ZT series. So whether it's the ZT410, ZT420, or the 510, those are your high-end industrial barcode label printers. I think MSRP is about 2,000 to 3,000, but they're workhorses. I would say 80% of the time when it goes down, it's usually firmware related, alignment related, and just simple maintenance of cleaning the rollers, like the platen rollers. And that's for the printers. You're probably gonna have a couple of printers located within your warehouse at each station. And then you might need thin clients. So you might need thin clients in order to connect like a dumb terminal, like from your laptop or your PC or a monitor down back into your warehouse management server. So let me just open this because we're done with the hardware side here. Now I'm going to talk about your warehouse management system or your WMS server. So in terms of your software, typically what you're going to have here is, let's say a bunch of our RF guns. These are RF guns, and they connect over your wireless network to your AP. This is your access point over the network into your wired, let's say this is a WMS server. So this is your warehouse management server, and some companies do this where they go wireless direct to WMS, right? I don't like this setup over here, because if you're going direct to your warehouse management server, there's a point of failure, or you can drop connections, and then anything within your drop connection, or let's say your users are picking replenishment or doing put away on their wireless scanners, and let's say the battery dies. You roam from one access point to another access point and you lose a connection. What ends up happening with that session on that screen is it gets reset. It brings them back to the logon screen. And if you have a lot of users in your warehouse, like 100 plus scan guns, I've been in implementations where we've had 200 guns. And one of my customers didn't have a setup where they had a server in the middle here that handles session persistency. And what ended up happening is the RF guns would lose a connection, they'd get back onto the sign-on screen, or they'd have to reboot their gun. So if you had a server in the middle that handles your sessions, so basically how it works, it's going to do a call request to your warehouse management server, your database. Your WMS server is going to send that screen. Let's say it's this user is in picking screen. It's going to send that screen, hold a session into there, and this happens within like milliseconds, very fast. So it'll receive it and it'll send it back and it'll send it back. Now this is a thin client middle server connection. So just to kind of make it easier to describe, and the server that we like to use, or what we've seen, is Avante or Wavelink or Staylinked. So my personal favorite is Staylinked. Basically, there's a client, software client that gets put onto your Zebra device, which is the Staylinked client. Then you have your client server, which is usually like a Windows server, or it could be a Unix server, or sometimes that software resides on your WMS server, which is your AS400. We've seen the Staylinked server reside on the AS400, so then it's creating connections into here directly, while your AS400 and your WMS or your Staylinked server is handling all these sessions. So basically, it's really good because you can manage Staylinked and your clients from the Staylinked administrator, which can be given to your warehouse manager, your IT admin staff, and everyone can manage those connections. They can see what's going on. Let's say you had your head office in Denver, but your warehouse was in LA. What you can do from Denver, your IT staff could actually manage those connections, reboot it, end the session, delete the session, re-add it, or let's say we needed to move an existing session from this gun to an iPad, we can do that. And that's the beauty of having a WMS client server in the middle. And I always recommend that because with fast roaming devices, you know, Wi-Fi is not exact science. You're going to have disconnections, you're going to have drops. But as long as you have session persistency in the middle, like Staylinked, you're going to have a clean running warehouse that is managed by your IT staff or your warehouse managers. And then if there's any problems, Staylinked is a great company. But anyways, that's the typical setup. You've got your WMS, you have your Staylinked server, you have your RF guns. Then after that, it's just a matter of how you design everything. Site survey, access points, VLANs. I recommend segmenting your VLANs just for RF only. Don't have sales come in there. Don't have different broadcast storms coming into your RF environment, because then you won't know exactly, you know, what's interrupting my RF traffic. So anyways, that is it for designing a warehouse management system with barcode scanners, RF scanners, barcode label printers, and Staylinked. So if you have any questions, let me know. We're based in Toronto. If you need a free consultation, I'm available for a 15-minute call. Check out the links below. And if you like the video, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.